Continuing on with my review of Radkovsky's Red Terror and the activities of the Czech in 1918. Um, uh, read it, was interested, and then skipped on to, the activities of our side, but it's important to note the activities of the white counter-revolutionaries, which preceded, the defense of the Reds and the introduction of Red Terror, in the summer and fall of 1918. Um, I'm trying to look at dates here. I believe the date I have is, we'll just say the Red Terror and in Soviet Russia was preceded by the attempted revolution of the masses, peasants and workers, workers leading, in Finland next door here. The Miami Beach of Finland, Viborg, is 30 minutes north of here. It's basically a commuter train ride, so it's very close. And that was a part of Finland back then, in 1918. So, basically, so there was a revolutionary war, which was, tragically crushed by the counter-revolutionary forces there. I guess basically landlord scum and other scum, kulak, landlord, whatever, and German landlord scum, represented, I guess, by the General Mannerheim, who went on to, play a negative role in Finnish and Soviet, or really Soviet history. But anyway, during that period, the revolutionaries fought the counter-revolutionaries, and both sides killed off 25,000 on one side and 25,000 on the other side. That was the military conflict. Once the counter-revolutionaries in Finland won, they shot 8,000 Red Finns, and then they imprisoned 90,000 more Red Finns, and this is in a country of, let me see, the total population. Oh, I didn't note total, maybe. Oh, yeah, I have it here. The total population of Finland in 1917 was 3 million people, and it was 70% peasant, much like Russia. So, what then? So 90,000 Red Finns, considerable chunk of the population was thrown into prison. The best of Finland, and 20,000, again, the best of Finland, were shot, by the scum of Finland. Then, continuing on, like in Viborg, again here, 30 minutes away, the scum, white counter-revolutionary scum, shot 600 Reds, and they stacked their bodies in two barns, I guess during the winter. And torture would often precede execution, so there'd be head chopping, pulling out the brains through the nose or the ears, beating people to death, in the face or the legs, and then chopping off their hands, and then chopping off their heads. And then cutting out tongues, cutting off ears, gouging out eyes, then chopping off the heads. Sort of like, a lot of fucking Gusano scum in shitholes like Chicago or New York. They love Pinochet. Well, in Chile, that's what Pinochet did, most famously to Victor Jara, I think his name was, the famous communist folk singer, in the stadium, gouging out his eyes and chopping off his fingers or something, or breaking his hands, and then, shooting him. So, hundreds died this way. and then hundreds, thousands died through starvation. Planned starvation. So so in for example, in Tamarfor, there were 6,000 prisoners, and one third of them were starved to death between June 6th and June 31st. Yeah, so this is the summer, and the Red Terror on our side started about July, really August, I believe it was. Yeah, there was a date. I think it was was it August 30th? Yeah, and then September 5th or August 30th, let's say, until November 6th, 1918, was the Red Terror, here in Russia, and also Ukraine. And what else? So, and people here could make a prediction based on the Finnish experience if the counter-revolution won in Russia, what would happen to the Russian people here? You multiply the Finnish figure. Finland is a very small country. What is it, 3 million, I think I said, at that time. Yeah, there was like 100 million plus, I believe it was, in Russia. So, you multiply those figures times 33. You get the number that would be murdered under, what's his name, Rangel or Kolchak, or, all the scum, the Czech Legion, and we could see in practice then at the same time, summer 1918, the White Terror came to the Volga, which is sort of the southeastern part of Russia, and to the Siberian region. There were 40,000 soldiers in the Czech Corps, Czech legions. They were demobilized Slavic soldiers from the Austro-Hungarian Empire. They were supposed to leave out of the Urals, towards Vladivostok, and then, out of the country, and then go to France. I guess the scum were going to use them to put down rebellions in France at the time. And the Soviet power, I guess, tried to disarm these soldiers, and these soldiers were naturally hostile and kind of an opportunistic. The Czechs, Hungarians, etc., the Romanians, they were basically, cockroach scum, counter-revolutionaries, more than half the country. A shithole like Croatia, for example, is 2-to-1 Nazi sympathetic, basically. So, these countries are like that. They're basically, seemingly civilized, but really, Nazi collaborators, Nazi murderers, anti-worker murderers. But as we shall see, things got nuanced, but, they were nuantial traitors and murderers. Yeah, it's interesting the way they conducted their campaign of murder. So anyway, they're naturally typical, whatever, getting old. I'm losing my linguistic abilities a little bit, but basically they were, they had antipathy to, of course, to the revolutionary government here. So they ended up, I guess, jumping off and in places like Penza, Chelyabinsk, which is right around the Urals, which is the dividing line between European and Asian Russia. Towards Kazakhstan, towards the southeast here. And, basically you had a whole bunch of armed soldiers, 8,000 in Penza, almost 9,000 in Chelyabinsk, and then in the 7 provinces of the Volga region, that is southeast Russia, famously, Stalingrad is a big town there. You only had 24,000 Red Army soldiers, and only a tenth of them, so about 2,400, were ready to march, ready to shoot counter-revolutionary soldiers if need be. So the units were scattered. The officers would betray the units, and the local Soviets, were sort of in disarray versus the local population, some of whom, the kind of, you can see, in capitalist society nowadays, the Instagram Chad filth and Karen filth, etc., or Becky and Kyle filth. They're the ones who are going to collaborate with, some Freikorps, murdering filth, like these Czech Legion bastards. So that's what they're doing. They're, carrying out basically counter-revolutionary riots. And so in Penza, when, 8,000 counter-revolutionary Czech scum, Austro-Hungarian filth, took over Penza, 250 Red Army soldiers were shot, and and basically Samara also, Samara, the town, now historically a Soviet academic, post-Soviet academic town, way out there. Well, it's north of Saratov. Is it north? Maybe north, I think, and then east. It's near on the Kazakh border. Excuse me. Sorry, pollution and heart defect, etc. But so Samara, out by the Kazakh border, became the center of the Czech Legion, the counter-revolution. They established government there called Komuch. The head was a so-called socialist revolutionary, Volsky, and these guys were basically basically like the squad in the U.S. Congress. They were left liberals, I guess. And, they did establish basic democratic freedoms, workers and peasants Congress, factory committees. They instituted an 8-hour day, and they had a red state flag. But, they were against the workers leading the society. They were like, okay, we're the Chads and the Kyles, the Beckys and the Kyles, and we're going to, we're running things. I'm boss. And you, Joe Worker, the slob, you stay in your place, and if you get out of your place, well, we'll see what happens. So so they extended, by August 1918, they extended from Samara, and then down south to Saratov, and then over to Simbirsk, then over west to Kazan, north and west to Kazan, and then further, I think, north and east to Ufa. In Samara, June 8th, 100 Red Army soldiers, 50 workers, and the leaders of the town under the dictatorship of the proletariat and the Bolsheviks were brutally killed and shot. 300 total were killed this way, and then you had 2,000 red prisoners of these phony socialists, or let's call them socialists, they weren't phony, but these traitors, these basically capitalist reformist traitor scum. They imprisoned 2,000 revolutionaries, workers, because the workers didn't know their place. Kyle and Chad, Becky, and Karen should run things, not Joe Blow, the schmuck, and some, intellectual bastard they hate. So, Samara, Sirzan, they shot another 1,000 under Admiral Kolchak in a place called Kurgan. They threw 1,060 into prison, 430 died. Simbirsk, they shot July 1918, 22nd of July, 400 shot. They would shoot double digits in the village. Let's see. So summer into autumn of 1918. Yeah, so basically the grand total was like 5,000 victims of the White Terror under these Beckys, Kyles, Karens, and Chads. Even the counter-revolutionary workers like railroad workers or longshore workers in Samara, for instance, were 20 railroad workers were shot in Samara, and 54 out of 75 longshore workers were shot because I guess they wouldn't strictly obey, Chad and Karen. In the chair of the Chads and Karens, Volsky, wrote, "Yeah, we have a lot of blood on our hands, but it was necessary to save democracy." That is the dictatorship of Chad and Karen and what's her name, AOC, and those other scum. So. And then they allowed the Cossacks to terrorize, the working class and the revolutionaries. So hundreds were shot in the Urals. They shot or tortured to death or hacked up with sabers. 1,050. This was it January 1919? Yeah, in the Urals. And what was it? Oh yeah, in 1919, in the village of Saharnoe, 700 Red Army soldiers who were trying to recover from typhus in a hospital. The Cossacks burned down the hospital, and all of the soldiers were murdered. And then they took the corpses of the soldiers and they buried them in dung heaps. They destroyed a village of 65 people in Meglius. What was it? May 5th, 1918, they destroyed the village of Alexandrovgaya. On the 9th, they killed 96 Red Army soldiers. They shot them, and the wounded were buried alive and reburied alive. And then another 675 were shot and or the wounded, survivors were buried alive. So they'd also torture the Cossacks by cutting off body parts and scalping people. And then they had a death train which went, towards the Far East. 4,300 people there, 1/3 of them. So what the heck is that? 4 times 312. Yeah, about 1,000, 1,500 of them died of hunger and the cold in executions. And they had special tortures with sledgehammers, beating the legs and the head, iron needles piercing the heels. I guess that is heels. Yes. And all of this was published in the Soviet press, and normal, revolutionary citizens of the Soviet Republic would read this and become bitter, and, they basically, they were ready to take tough action against these torturer murderers and Chads and Kyles, Karens and Beckys. So... counter to that trend in Izhevsk, which is where one of the armories to make the Kalashnikov ended up being, and Mr. Kalashnikov lived most of his life. It's out in where what's that minority? I forget, but it's way out there in the center of Russia towards Siberia. Excuse me. They loosened the Soviet government loosened the strictures on the Chads and the Karens, and they said no more death penalty. So in response, they had a riot and a rebellion, I guess, of NCOs against the local Soviet there, and 300 were executed by the whites before, the other, was it 400, I think, were rescued, but 300 were executed by the whites, so 400 rescued by the reds, and some were buried alive again. And so in the fall of 1918, like 500 to 1,000 were killed by Chad and Karen. And then over in Ukraine, the German occupying army, basically, like Nikolaev, which is a major city, I guess it is, near Odessa. The German occupying army basically murdered 5,000 Reds. And then, what was it? Yeah, the Krasnov, he was a German scum. His troops basically murdered 30,000 in 1918. So, and that was just in one region, I guess, from Mariupol, Sevastopol, Nikolaev. So that's like southern Russia, Ukraine. And what else besides that? So that's 30,000, right? And compared to the White Terror in Finland, which was 5,000 and around the Volga, Urals, excuse me, and or Volga, and east, north, whatever, and the Urals, a good 1,000 to plus, I don't know, let's say, perhaps as many as 5,000. So 10,000, 30,000, what is it, 40,000. Finland, which was part of Russia prior to the revolution, how many, basically they shot out of hand 28,000, I want to say. Basically 28,000. So, you do the math there. What is that? That's 30,000, 60,000, 65,000, I think I said, for the Komuch, and, another 5,000, probably on order of like 70,000 from winter of 1918 through to the summer of 1918. And then, that set the stage for the Red Terror, or readied public opinion in the Soviet liberated zones for the Red Terror, which was to follow. So by mid-summer of 1918, the Soviet leadership concluded they needed to strengthen the dictatorship of the proletariat against Chad and Karen. So